grab your wine. It's time for Rosé All Day and Julie's a Mess, where we talk about current events and living in an intersex life. And now, here's Julie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. This is a very special week, so we're going completely outside of what you would normally see in our regularly scheduled programming. We wanted to make some time for a very important play and a very important discussion. This is a roundtable with the cast of Miss Evers' Boys. It is written by the playwright Dr. David Feldshuh. And we have some important social issues we want to cover in this discussion. And also, we just want to let you guys know this is running in Savannah on February 24th at 7 p.m. So thank you so much for joining us on our show tonight. I think you're in for a real treat. It's definitely a departure from what we normally do, but we think a really important one. So to get started, we are so honored to actually have the playwright with us tonight. So I'm going to introduce Dr. David Feldshuh. He is a professor at Cornell, as well as a physician and obviously a playwright. Dr. Feldshuh, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
You've covered the most important points, but I teach at Cornell. And obviously I wrote this play, and the kinds of things I teach are directing and writing and acting. And I actually teach a course on laughter as well. I've been at Cornell for almost 4 decades.
Right. And then tonight we also have our co-host, Teresa Miller, with us. Teresa, do you want to introduce yourself to us?
Sure. My name is Teresa Michelle Jackson. I have a background in theater. I was a professor and administrator for 17 years. My area of interest is Black theater. So this is what's drawn me to this. So I'm very thankful to have this invite. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And then let's go around our cast tonight. So we have our lead here, Jamie Cartwright. Would you like to start us off?
Certainly. My name is Jamie Cartwright. I will be playing the role of Miss Evers. I was invited by the director, but my background is mostly, believe it or not, opera and classical singing. And so, but I've had some family in the medical field, and the story of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment is one that needs to be told. So I'm honored to actually have a small part in bringing the story to life.
Garrick, why don't you? I know we've got some connection issues on your end, but let's see if we can hear from you.
Okay, I'm Garrick Duckery. I knew a little about the stuff. So being a part of the play has really helped me get more information and know more about the study. Actually, I've only done mostly background acting, and I started that last year. I've been in a few things, but other than that, it's only been background acting. So this is very new for me, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you. Elgin.
Yes, Elgin.
Elgin, I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Oh. Well, yes, my name's Elgin Lee, and I've been doing background acting for the last 8 years or so. And my friends Garrett and Levon, we worked together on several projects, and when they offered, invited me to this, I, jumped at the chance just to do something new, be in the forefront and be a main cast member versus just being in the background. So it was just a new experience, something new for the new year. Plus, I knew about the story and what had went on in the history of it. So I felt that it was needed to be retold to make sure that the new generation understands what we've been through.
And Carlos?
I'm so sorry. What are the questions we're supposed to be answering right now?
Oh, yeah, no worries. Just let us know what your involvement is, what your role is, and then how you got involved in the play, in the reading.
Okay. So my name is Carlos Lucky Jr. I play Willie Johnson. I actually got involved in this play quite oddly. A friend of mine that I graduated from SCAD with was supposed to be in this role, but he had a death in his family, and he asked me if I could do it, take over for him. And I had a talk with the director, and everyone opened me with welcome arms. So I started like a week later than everyone, but it's been very welcoming. I knew about the background, so to speak, of the Tuskegee experiment. I'm from Andalusia, Alabama, but I didn't know that there was a play about what went on until I was involved in it. So it's been very eye-opening to see the perspective that this play has on the inner workings of what was going on, and not from just learning from it from like secondhand or through a book of school. So that's what I've taken away the most, is how it's affected people rather than how it's affected a whole community. It's been brought down to a point of view, and I appreciate that. To actually be able to empathize more is one thing, to hear about what happens to the many, and then to hear about specific characters. I empathize more somehow with that.
Mm-hmm. And Levon, you can also let us know who isn't able to make it tonight, but please introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, who was not unfortunately able to make it tonight was our doctor. Oh, geez, who's the character? I'm so sorry.
Douglas.
Yeah, Dr. Douglas, who is played by Ray Ellis. He unfortunately is not here tonight, as well as Keyshawn Husey, who plays Hodman Bryan. Yeah, incredible actors, and we wish them the best, and all of us are going to have the best time opening night. Yeah, so I am Levon Ewens, and I'm playing Caleb Humphreys. I got into this production. I don't know if it was either Jamie or I who was the first one asked to participate in this. I've been with Savannah Readers Theater since their first production. I was doing their PR and a promo actually, and then their lead actor, he it dropped out of the production 2 weeks until opening night, and our director Bonnie, she didn't have anybody else to replace him, and so she kind of like asked me, and I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. I have a significant background in stage acting, and so I did. She liked what she saw, and I'm kind of like her PR guy, and everything that she's in that has like any male, she asks me to participate in it. Yeah. I've known about the Tuskegee syphilis experiments for years. I forgot how I heard about it because I'm originally from South Korea. I'm from Seoul. So when I moved to America in 2005, I kind of took the active initiative to learn about everything about both my Black and Korean cultures as it pertains to how our communities are affected in America. And, like I'm in school now, I'm in the cardiovascular interventional science track. And so, I'm learning all about like HIPAA and informed consent. And I'm also learning about the histories about, like where these policies actually came from, and the horror and the negative implications that are still affecting the African American community to this day.
Thank you. And we will definitely be getting into more of that. So thank you for setting that up for us as well. Okay, so we're going to get the audience now familiar with exactly what the play is, and when people are talking about the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, what those are. So David, can you tell us just very quickly your sort of summary of the history, and then also what the play is about and why you felt like you had to write it, kind of what drew you to the subject and how it got started?
Absolutely. And let me begin, though, with acknowledging the people that I'm seeing, as well as those members that couldn't be here, for your willingness to do my play. I'm honored that you would do it, and I hope it serves you and your community the way you want it to. So the Tuskegee study was a study that lasted between 1932 and 1972, in which 600 men, 200 with syphilis and 400 controls in the area around Tuskegee, Alabama, were encapsulated into the longest non-therapeutic, that means they weren't treated, human experimentation study in United States medical history. And what's interesting about the study, or at least what I think needs to be appreciated, both to appreciate the play and to appreciate the message of the play, is that it didn't start out with a group of doctors wanting to do harm. There was a long history of trying to do various things in this arena, including the Rosenwald Foundation, who set up small whitewashed schools in the area. And then there was a treatment program, but that ran out of money for 6 months. And so a number of doctors decided to continue the program with the notion that there was no money, we'll continue it, we'll get more money, and then we'll treat these men again. And of course, they never got money. There was all kinds of reasons, which we can bring up later, that the study continued for 40 years and harm was done beyond, not only at the beginning, but perhaps more importantly, once there was a standard of treatment with penicillin and the men were kept from getting the penicillin. So that's, in a way, the historical background for the play. The play is about a nurse caught in the web of this study. And although the play is about the study, the play is really about friendship and trust. There was a relationship between these men who were her friends, who were in her community, and this nurse, who was a real life, live nurse, Eunice Rivers, and that trust was violated. But what's more difficult to appreciate is that Nurse Rivers, and in the play, Nurse Evers, was caught in an untenable situation. She couldn't both follow her tenets of the nursing profession and love these men and care for them in the way she wanted to care for them and treat them. So it follows her really demise. Not that she died, but morally and ethically, she died in her own mind. So what I wanted to do in writing this play was really write the play about an African-American woman caught in a tragedy, like a Greek tragedy, where she really could not escape no matter what she did.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that, if that's okay. I love your perspective on this, because what makes this play so interesting is that we do see her point of view. And I love that you connected to a Greek tragedy, right? We get to this point where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? And so it's this situation of, morality. When you look at this character who starts in the courtroom, who's really, she thought she was contributing to fixing this inferior treatment of African Americans. So it was that whole idea of the greater good and what I'm doing and my oath to make sure I'm, supporting these physicians. And that's what makes the story so complicated and so wonderful, and also so heartbreaking at the same time. Like, I found myself reading, of course, I've read this years ago, but rereading it, you find yourself yelling at her, but then your heart breaking for her, just being caught in a situation where she's really trying to do the best she can to help these people, but also realizing the harm and seeing it, living in that community and seeing that demise in front of her eyes.
That kind of leads us as well into almost maybe even answers this question, but Dr. Feldshuh, please expand. You chose to write it from her perspective and not from the perspective of, let's say, one of the doctors or one of the characters like Caleb or Willie. Can you kind of tell us explicitly why you chose that angle and to take it this way?
Absolutely. So I was a resident in emergency medicine in Minneapolis when I first read Bad Blood by Professor James Jones, a brilliant book about the Tuskegee study. And that was the primary source about the Tuskegee study. There have been a number of books since that time. So this was in the early 80s. And when I read about the study, I think it's fair to say it was not some revelation about the unethical behavior or the misuse of medicine or even the lying that pushed me to write the play. It really was the fact that I was wondering, what would I have done in 1932 as a white doctor if I had been asked to join the study? What would I have known? What would I have appreciated? What would have been my moral awareness within the context of that time? Because when I read Professor Jones's book, it became clear that the most liberal, in quotation marks, doctors were the ones that participated in the Tuskegee study. These were the public health doctors. And this was a war on syphilis. They had no notion that they were doing something immoral. And the last defense of the Tuskegee study was in 1974 that I read. So the reason I wrote the play was to work out that question that I just said, what would I have done? But also to point out that the idea that you have good intentions in no way is going to guarantee that you're not going to get yourself into something that's unethical.
Yeah. What I found about what I found that one experiences within that regard of sort of like, is this deception coming from a bad place or not, was that as she gets taken, she calls it up the hill, which is like, oh, we're going to do this, but you just have to wait a little longer. Well, actually now the fence post is out here and now out here. And almost that sort of is like how everybody was going, spiraling. But what I did feel was that by the end of the play, it does sort of feel like there's a more nefarious knowing presence going on, that it's like it wasn't that everybody just was doing their best. But was that just my interpretation of it, or did you write it with a little bit of like everybody's kind of especially the doctors involved are kind of a little bit more conscious of what they're doing and buckling down anyway because they're so invested now?
Well, this is a complex question because human beings are complex. And because when human beings do things that are absolutely evil, and they will not necessarily see themselves as doing something that's evil. I mean, this whole idea of cognitive dissonance and that kind of thing. But I'm talking beyond the Tuskegee study was allowed to go on because there was diffusion of responsibility. Different people didn't take charge of it. There was this sense that they made excuses. And this has gone on forever, including, for example, I saw a documentary on the people actually in Poland shot people. That was their job, to shoot people. And their notion was, oh my goodness, why do I have to do this? Poor me. They were treating themselves as victims rather than thinking they had done anything wrong. People have the ability to rationalize forever. And I think that what happens in the play is that the rationalizations change. They become more bald and less humane. Mm-hmm. And until finally the doctors just say, well, we're doing it because we're doing it. We're just going to continue. We're just not going to stop. And Nurse Evers in the play tries to escape by giving penicillin. And then when it doesn't work, when you have the Herxheimer reaction, that's her excuse for falling in line, as the line is in the play. Again, I know I'm repeating myself when I say that the purpose of the play is to get a bit of moral humility from everybody who has power over anybody else. Because without that, and without following the golden rule, no matter how many informed consent items you sign or how many institutional review boards this goes through, somebody's going to do something to somebody.
I have a question.
It's not going to be in their best interest.
Right. I have a question. I told you my area of interest is Black theater. And so I always pose this in the beginning of my courses of my Black American theater course. Where do plays like this fall in the genre? So there's this idea, and I love it because my students, they come in with a opinion of what they think. And then I say, okay, so if we have a white Jewish playwright present a play about a Black family, if we have a Black director that presents a play about a white family, what if we have Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote a play about a white Jewish family? Where is this whole notion of Black theater versus white theater, or what we like to call American theater? Where do you feel Miss Evers' Boys fits into this whole line of genres and categories?
This is a very elegant but somewhat explosive question, as you know. And my belief is in skill and craft. If you can write it, you can write it. I mean, and maybe you can't, but if you have the skill to write it and the sensitivity and the common sense to go to people who do know about these elements, hopefully you can write it. Now, you may not be able to, but the opposite is also true. You may have all the cultural assets and not be able to write it. So that is my opinion. It's not been everybody's opinion. There has been plenty of controversy about this play, and we can get into that if you'd like. And part of it has to do with the fact that I'm white. But only part of it. Most of it has to do with politics, actually.
Absolutely.
Not so much identity politics, but similar to the kind of question you asked. Why didn't you excoriate these two white doctors?
Oh, no, I love it.
And the reason I put it on Nurse Evers in the play is because I wanted the audience to identify with her and ask, what would I do? In the same way I was asking, what would I do? And that's what motivated me to write the play.
I think it gives a great perspective, too, on why these men went forth with this experiment and why they trusted her. And then some of the mechanisms that were used to bring in these men, to bring in these Black men, the idea of providing monetary, supplements, the idea of providing hot meals in this time period when the whole country was suffering, like what that meant. So I think it brings an interesting take from it being her perspective to see, because it's easy for us as outsiders to say, oh, I would never participate in that. Why would anyone do this? But then when we see it's a matter, when that one guy talks about this is more money than he's ever had, right? This idea of how did they get here, and seeing that path and seeing that guilt in her. I definitely agree with you as far as if you have the knowledge, if you're going to the demographic, you're doing the research, you're employing people who can tell the honest narrative and story, then you have something there. Because just because you're a part of the culture doesn't necessarily mean you're ultimately going to write a great story. And in all honesty, it takes allies to tell stories for things to get heard. Absolutely.
One thing that
I'll say, Mel, playing the character Ben, I played Ben Washington. And when they're talking about the friendship and the trust, that was his big thing. You know, starting out as a character that really has trust issues and things, being the elder of all of the guys that was in the treatment, and him coming from the end of, you know, being 50-something years old and having that mistrust in his ways, dealing with white people back in his days, like he said, and then having this black woman that, you know, from his community take that trust, even, you know, all the way through those 40 years, he had that trust always to his last days. And that what really kind of upset me, far as my character and the whole thing, that this guy trusted her even to the end. You know?
I mean, I guess a question that's not in the play is, would that character have been died a better death, giving up that trust, or dying with the illusion that Nurse Evers really was taking care of him or had his welfare at heart?
I think him dying with the illusion was more peaceful for him, even though I know it was it's not the truth. He didn't die with the truth. He died with the lie, you know, that his friend, you know, betrayed him, but he didn't know that. So it was like he wanted a peaceful death. He was worried about, you know, how his body would look if they studied him and this and this and that. So it was like, let him have his peace versus disrupting that and have him, you know, go silently and quiet and peaceful versus just, you know, knowing that you did him wrong. You know, I think that's what it was in that part of it.
Well said. Yeah.
I think one of the things that struck me, and I'll say this and then get back to what you were just saying there with that, is that, like, somehow this play reminded me that Black history is American history. It's not just Black history. It's also white history.
Thank you. That is
you know,
something that I wish was emphasized 10 million times more. This is not just a subsection of history. Black theater or Black American theater is American theater, just as Latin American. It's all American theater. We all have a role to play in this country. Forgive me, but yeah, this is U.S. history. This is no less American history than George Washington, than Thomas Jefferson, than anything. We're here. We belong. In fact, you know, this play is set during the time of Langston Hughes. I too sing America. We're here.
They had to take the good with the bad. You can't just highlight, you know, everything that was good about the country and say, oh, this is American history. But when it's something bad, like Vietnam or the syphilis treatment or some kind of thing where we lost or we look bad as a country, as far as the decisions we made or whatever, we look bad together, you know, and if we do good, we look good together most of the time. But sometimes you always want to try to take blame or shoot blame or take, you know, I did it type of thing, where if I didn't do it, it was, you know, it was bad and I didn't do it, I, you know, put the blame on something else. Don't put it on me type of thing. And I think that's more American too, that we do that a lot as a country, you know, where if we do something good, oh, hey, look at us. But we do something bad, hey, that was somebody else's fault. That was the other president before me, or that was the other country's fault that dropped the ball. We, you know, whatever it may be. So
I think what's interesting
Right, I've
about
noticed
I'm sorry.
since I've lived here. Oh no, that's right. Yeah, but I've noticed since living here since 2005 that, like, the one unifying theme of American culture is how resistant it is to accountability.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to the play and how it kind of sheds light on the mistrust of public health and vaccines. So this is something in the African American community, but in a lot of communities, this is not just in the African American community, but that idea of having that mistrust of public health, choosing, and a lot of Black families, especially Black men, don't seek medical treatment. or when we look at things that have happened since Tuskegee, whether it be Henrietta Lacks in the cultivation of her cells, whether it be some other, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, other issues that we've had with the idea of mistreatment, not being honest, not being forthcoming. And now we see why there are still health disparities in a lot of oppressed communities because of that lack of trust. Like, how do we get to a better place as a community, as a country, where people are trusting public health, trusting vaccines, trusting medical treatment? I mean, we're just now shedding light on Black maternal health, right? All these things that are constantly happening. So when you hear those, we understand this trust, but we also need to get to a place where we realize that there are doctors who truly care and truly want to treat, and there are solutions to some of the things that, a lot of patients are still passing from that could receive treatment.
Yeah. I'm an ovarian cancer survivor as of 2022. And I live in Georgia, very rural Georgia. The first ER I went to for my symptoms where the tumor was discovered was absolutely atrocious. And I mean, I fit the demographic of women who should not make it. I was very fortunate. I did make it. But I had an inside track in some ways to the J.C. Lewis Cancer Center in Savannah. If I had not had that inside track, I probably would have received treatment in one of the counties in Georgia, one of the 96 counties in Georgia that doesn't even have an ICU. It's fun. COVID, I was immunocompromised for about 6 months. Like, if I had had COVID during chemo, and I think Levon knew me during my round when I was in active chemo, I really suffered. But then, I also had an adverse reaction. Dr. Feldshuh, you might recognize this, to paclitaxel. I ended up having 3 adverse reactions because it was from the Pacific U. Paclitaxel and docetaxel, Taxol and Taxotere, which are the most common frontline or secondary drugs for chemo. And I was one of the nurses, not, because the idea of evidence-based medicine exists, said, oh, normally African Americans do great with Taxol and Taxotere. Well, I wasn't. And 3 anaphylactic reactions in 21 days is terrifying. So I can understand why people are like, oh, they don't care. They don't care. Well, there are going to be people that do care. There are going to be people that don't care. And should we have to navigate all that? No. But what do you do? And eventually I do want to ask, what should Miss Evers have done?
Yeah. That's such a good question. Yeah. I feel like everyone should answer that, honestly.
Right. I think that's a question you vote on. What do you do?
Yeah. I know what I would have done if I obviously hindsight being the, in the from the audience outside of it, I think I know what I would have done to get out of it. But
what would you have done?
I would have taken that night supervisor job in New York.
She should have married me.
Yes, except that wouldn't have been the worst thing. To have left with you and married you, that wouldn't have been the worst thing. The only thing is, you have syphilis. You have an STI. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, and Dr. Feldshuh, correct me if I'm wrong, it's passed on genetically. What if, you not only had given it to her, but then given it to her children? Because notice how only Black men were being treated for syphilis. What about the women who contracted it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of misogynoir just kind of floating in the ether, especially during that time. And I think even so to this day. And I don't want to get into a big thing on identity politics, because that's not the point. But there's an intersection of racism and misogyny. And it's like, okay, so how do you choose? How do you know what to do when everything is stacked against you?
I think she should have.
What kind of
told
choices?
the guys about the treatment. She should have influenced the guys since she knew she had their trust. And she had that job in New York as a little back burner type of thing. Hey, I got an escape plan, but I want to make sure that these guys are good to go. She should have stood her ground and said, hey, Caleb, and all of y'all guys, take the penicillin so you can heal your bodies, and at least the rest of your days might be better than where they are going to be in the future.
Well, I want to play devil's advocate in that. What at this point they're on the no treatment list, right?
Right.
So they're on the no treatment list. This money is supporting their family, children. What do you do in that situation? And I think what makes Miss Evers so, you feel your heart breaks for her, because her reasoning for not taking that job was the idea of, I don't want to take this from someone else. She was so proud of this nurse that was taking over for her and going to have this opportunity. These opportunities were far and few in between. You have to look at her status at this point. She was one of, how in the Black community, that idea of made it. She was one of those that had made it, and maybe it was the idea of, her selling out to do this. And, I think that's what makes her such a complex character, that it's not an easy way. Someone's going to get hurt. The men were already on a no treatment list. She thought she was giving them treatment. At least they were being treated for their symptoms, right? She thought she was giving them something more, and something familiar. Otherwise, she thought they were going to retreat and never get any treatment. Not to say that I'm one way or the other, just throwing that out there.
Right, I forgot about
Well,
that.
what strikes me is and then Carlos, let's hear from you. It's because your character is very affected by this in the play. But what strikes me is almost a mothering type instinct that Dr. Feldshuh, you really, at least from my perspective as a woman, really nailed this kind of like, I don't want to let I don't want to leave them alone with people I don't trust. Like, I don't trust what's going to happen, and I don't like what I'm doing. But if I'm not here, something might be even worse. So I'll throw that out there. And then also, Carlos, let's definitely, you jump in here and we can always get back to this.
I was going to add that it's hard to say what she should have done, even like with hindsight being 2020, because like she said, Teresa, I do believe, they're on a no treatment list. And even like right before they get on the no treatment list, she finds out that, oh, if you take this penicillin, you're probably going to die. So it's like, does she just tell them this information and let them choose? Or is she like she sees that, okay, they're able to eat, they're able to provide for their family with all of this. It's not a black and white situation.
It's not. And having been on the other side of it as a patient, having to decide, okay, am I going to have surgery or am I going to go straight to chemo? I had clear cell carcinoma. I had to have chemo because if I didn't, the chances of it coming back and then at that point losing the opportunity to actually be cured, because I was fortunately I was diagnosed with stage 1C and not stage 3 or 4, and it was really 50-50. But yeah, I mean, how do you take, like, sometimes you can feel like, and as a patient, even with my access to education, these choices are very overwhelming. Also, this is what during the 30s, 40s, 50s, how much access to education have these men had? How much because it sounds like, at least, from the basic history of nursing that I know, and Dr. Feldshuh, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is not a 4-year degree, right? This is a 2-year degree, nursing.
I don't know what the real nurse Evers, how many years she had. I'm pretty sure it would not be 4 years.
Yeah, it would have because even in 1971, when my aunt graduated from nursing school, it was a 2-year on the job program. It was an RN was not a BSN. And so,
and you have
but these doctors have been able to go to school, work with microscopes. They know more, and Dr. Feldshuh, you probably remember that female nurses were required to stand when the surgeons came in. There was a lot of, you are a servant, you are a caretaker who has access to just enough knowledge but you're still a woman and you're still a Black woman. There are lines you cannot cross or else you're going to hurt the community. Teresa, Michelle, does that track? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, I was just saying, I definitely understand the point you were trying to make. I think that's what makes her, once again, I have a love for Miss Evers. I know it's easy to see her as a bad guy, but when she's translating the medical treatment to the patients, right? It's something beautiful in that. And, they look at her, what I envision, they look at her, what does this mean? We have this translation happen. And, oh, okay, you broke it down where I understand. You look like me. You know what we've gone through as a community. You're from this community. I trust you. Let's go for it. So it is something very sad and beautiful about that, but I definitely see the point you're making. We do have a question in the chat that I think we should definitely address. Would you ever write a follow-up play to this story?
I think the honest answer is no. I think the play is out there and it has a life of its own, and a follow-up story can be written by others and with their own perspective. I think to write a play, you have to have just a passion to work out something in yourself. And this play was my attempt to explore that impulse.
And so was this passion for yourself in writing this play, this idea of ethical dilemma?
Yes. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say, which is that, first of all, I never thought this play would be done, ever. And I never thought it would have any, think about the subject. And I never thought it would ever see the light of day. I remember putting it in a mailbox and thinking, that's it. And it took really about 7 years to write, because I didn't write it all the time. I wrote it during the summers. And so I was as shocked as anybody. But it told a story. And in telling that story, I had a chance to have discussions similar to the one we're having tonight, where I learned things, and I'm continually learning things. And those things help me reflect on something that asks more questions than gives answers. And that's the goal of the play, I think.
Garrick, you were having some connection issues, and we haven't gotten to hear from you, but I think your connection's a little clearer. Do you have any thoughts you want to share on this?
Actually, correct. So I really haven't been able to hear everything that has been said. So I'm trying to actually listen in and catch up now, because I did switch over to my phone, which seems to be working a whole lot better.
Well, let me ask you this, Garrett. What part of the play really spoke to you? Like, what was there any part that really sticks in your heart and mind?
Well, I mean, you all talk about Nurse Evers and the guys, doing the study. But as I think when I was in college, and, majority of the time when you're in college, you don't have money. So you do whatever it takes to get money. And I've done some studies. Now, it wasn't syphilis, but it was other studies of taking other medications that may have side effects and other things happen to me. But in that particular time, I'm not worried about the side effects. I'm just worried about the money. So to get back to the guys, they getting, $14, $15, whatever it was. But back in that time, if they don't have anything, $14 or $15 is, like $100 to them. So yeah, we can say that it's kind of hard to continue with the study, but if you in a hard time, $14 or $15, whatever it is they was getting back in the 30s and the 40s, is a lot more than what they had or what they were making at the time. So I'm pretty sure they just continuously went through the study, not only because of Nurse Evers, but also because of the money that they were getting from the study.
Yeah, I really noticed one of the things that really struck me, and I wanted some of you guys to talk. So maybe the other three can weigh in now too with this kind of question that leads us into the cast experience a little more. But what was it like to play men who were had so many resources taken from them? Like, one of the things that was really potent was that Ben didn't know how to write his name. And that has a lot of symbolism, right? And being able to sign a contract. And just to be so, like, to have so many resources taken from you that you're in this pliable state, it was very upsetting, but I know that that's not necessarily rare entirely. And what was it like to play a role like that? And what feeling, like, just tell me anything.
Yeah, Ben, learning to write his name. And I think that's where his trust for her came into play too, where she actually taught him something that he learned. Like, your education, once you learn it, they can't take it away from you. So it was something that he kind of felt that their bond was so strong that she taught me how to write my real name and not just say my name, but actually write it. And aspire, that's a word that he had aspirations and stuff like that. That's the word they kept putting out there. And it made them not only think of their day-to-day life, but aspire to be even better as the dancers, they little group they were in and everything else. So it was like she was a motivation for them at a time that they needed it. But at the same time, we just didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. But that's the only thing that was kind of bad about the whole thing, because she did motivate those guys a lot, and she stayed by them a lot too. And so I guess that's what kept her around instead of just giving up. So
Right. And that lack of education is ultimately what led to, how successful this experiment was, for lack of a better word, right? Why was it able to go on so long? And also why there wasn't anyone to take responsibility for it, right? That idea of, oh, it's harming a group that is already in a dire place, or it's harming a group that we already feel, can handle more than other people.
Don't
Like
throw
that
white
idea.
man's money after the colored man's disease. I'm quoting the line, and within context.
Yeah, that idea of like Black people can withstand more pain, and this whole the whole notion that Mrs. Evers was trying to dispute and put all this effort in. The doctors were trying to put all this effort into proving that, okay, we're going to show everyone these things are myths and they're not true. And I think that's what
then once it was proven, it's like they never actually wrapped it up. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think you're absolutely right. We do actually have another online question. Were there any feelings that emerge from, let's see, when writing this play, were there any colorations or feelings that emerged from the Jewish story, both being marginalized communities in history?
I'm not exactly sure what the question is answering, but I will say that it's an interesting question, again, about identity, about who writes what. Steven Spielberg did the original The Color Purple, the movie. It was the same kind of question that came up. And I think I may have sent somebody, there's about a 60-page article about medical ethics in film. And it talks about the Steven Spielberg problem, in quotation marks. I'm paraphrasing, but it's this whole disjunction between, again, who can write what. I think that power is what really unites people at the wrong end of a medical experiment. It's the differentiation. Again, that's the reason you have informed consent and institutional review boards, because you're trying to make it objective. Denial is much easier. Everybody who's going to do these things probably thinks they're doing the right thing. And that is what's so scary. And I think that was scary in World War II. And I think that was scary in Germany. It was scary about anything that has implications that affect somebody else and harm them. And
it's almost like, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm not saying anything that you don't know and that your listeners don't know. It's just that,
well, I think
it can be subtle. I mean, it's not subtle. It's the way one fools oneself that might be subtle.
I think what's interesting is that there are actually really, really bad people out there who are ill-intentioned,
Yes,
who want to, but the most damage is done by the people who don't take time to think and have a lot of power and just put into motion. It's almost like the ism takes a life of itself, and they're just, oh yeah, I want to help, and it's going to make me feel good to be someone that helps these communities. And that is almost like, it maybe has the biggest effect because and just recognizing, I think, as a person who is the ancestor of the guilty parties here, like recognizing the ability for that to happen. There are some characters in the play I think are really, really bad. And then there are some who are like well-intentioned, but just ignorant, like so deeply ignorant. And so I think that's something that is just really important to remember, is like these things, you don't have to be terrible to put bad things into motion. We have 9 minutes left, and I kind of want to give everyone, and Teresa, Michelle, you can jump in here too, but I kind of want to give everyone a chance to sort of say their final words and their final piece and whatever before we close out. So Carlos, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Do you want to just kind of share with us either something that was really potent about working on this, or a takeaway maybe you even have from this discussion?
I cannot think of anything right now, being put on the spot.
No pressure.
No worries. You don't have to.
Yeah, come back to me.
Sure.
Well,
Levon, we haven't heard from you in a minute.
I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Because actually, initially I was kind of concerned about playing a Caleb, because the first performance that I was cast in for Savannah's Reader Theater, he was a parallel of Martin Luther King that leaned very heavily, into his religion and being a reverend. And so I thought that I was being typecast. But when I started digging even deeper into it is a character in every scene that he's in, there's layer upon layer upon layer to explore and to acknowledge at every moment. And this has been the most fulfilling experience, as an actor, like as an exercise, because he is so angry and he has such a justifiable anger at the world. And there are even individuals within the and also who he should be absolutely infuriated at, but it's something that he suppresses. And then he's harboring a lot of trauma too, and so what he sees in Evers is maybe not necessarily an absolution or a savor, but kind of like a salve from all that pain he's harboring, and to explore all of that and to express that into an audience. I mean, yeah, this has been an unforgettable experience, and I'm so excited to see how the audience takes away from this incredible character that you have created. Again, thank you so much. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Garrick, were you going to jump in there? Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to really say I played Dr. Brodus, and from my I guess my assessment or my summary of Dr. Brodus, he's kind of caught in between as well, of trying to help the community, but also he's on the unethical side of trying to do the study, but he's also trying to, I guess, hopefully help the Black community as well in the long run. So I'm still trying to understand, like, Dr. Brodus, as one of the doctors in the play, like how he got into, I guess, how he got himself into this whole thing, just like Nurse Evers, because Nurse Evers really was just doing what Dr. Brodus asked her to do. So was he more on the ignorant side like her, or not?
I think he had different justifications.
Okay.
He was a leader in the African American community, medical community, the head of Tuskegee, the hospital. So
Right.
it's exactly what you just said. But he was also in no way a free agent.
Yeah.
He was part of the system.
Okay.
So that's the complexity of it, and that's why it's there.
All right, we've got 4 minutes left, but I do still want to get to everyone else to have their last word. So if you are okay, guys, staying on another 5 minutes, we can do that. If you need to hop off, fine, but would love to still hear from everyone. So what about Elgin? Do you want to give us your thoughts, final thoughts?
Yeah, just listening to the roundtable tonight, thinking about Miss Evers, her endeavors about her trust issues with the guys, and my own personal experiences dealing with doctors and things like that. It opened up my eyes a little bit more about the story, and then having to deal with being a father and knowing that when my kids were being born, how their mother was treated at the hospital and stuff like that too. Because it opens my eyes a lot more, being there in the delivery room and stuff like that, and seeing that some nurses gave a little bit more care than others and stuff like that, and it kind of, it's in my vision of my mind of what was going on. And I'm like, oh, that's what they was doing, so it kind of opens my eyes a lot more about what was going on in my own personal life of being, putting that trust out there to those people, and then seeing some of that trust being misused and misguided, as far as, oh, this is a nurse.
We just lost Elgin, but I think he had some good thoughts in there, and hopefully he'll come back. Carlos, do you feel like you've got some thoughts you want to share, or you want to skip?
Sure. I'll figure something out. The thing that I take away most from most things that I am a part of is the camaraderie between characters. And that's the thing that somehow connects with me the most with this play. It's not the fiasco of it all and how characters are mishandling things or this, that, and the other. It's the connection between Miss Evers and all the boys. That's the name of the play. But that's the thing that I leave with most like fulfilling with the play is that connection that they have. Oh, and thank you for doing this, and thank you for writing the play, Dr. Feldshuh.
Elgin, you got cut off at the end there. Do you want to close us off with a closing sentence or anything?
You're muted.
Oh, we can't hear you.
I was just going to say thank you for the invite from my fellows, and I'm enjoying being with the cast, and this whole thing is a great new experience for me and something I can get used to doing and expanding upon. So appreciate it.
All right, Miss Jamie, please tell us what your thoughts are.
All right, so character-wise, I think the heaviest thing is just the shame, the guilt of failure, having made a decision, genuinely, I think, really wanting to help, and just seeing it all go down the tubes. And then when you did break your vow, and you said, okay, I'm going to follow my conscience, having that completely go wrong and just living with that shame and guilt is really powerful. But So that's what I think I have to grapple with the most as Miss Evers. But all that though, I'm blown away. I cannot believe I'm speaking to the actual Dr. David Feldshuh right now, and to Dr. Teresa Michelle. I'm sorry, I blanked on your last name. Leftover chemo or leftover chemo brain. My apologies. But I am so honored and grateful. And I hope with all my heart that this isn't just acting, that this isn't just theater, that it tells the story and it communicates the message that just makes up the mosaic of our American history and culture, and that it will be worth it, and that the audience will be moved, and that you, the author, will be proud of our work, my work specifically. That's all I want. And I'm just blown away and so very grateful.
Thank you. You're way inflating me, but I take your compliment and I thank you. And I think if one person learns about the Tuskegee study from your work, that's a measure of success. And I hope you'll embrace that. That's the goal. That's another goal that we haven't talked about. There's a lot of things we haven't talked about, but bringing it to the public awareness was a big deal for me.
Thank you, Dr. Feldshuh.
Thank you, everyone, for being here so much. This was really powerful for me to be a part of. I'm just like so lucky that I'm part of Julie's podcast and then got to be part of this. And thank you for just letting me help facilitate this discussion. It's been really meaningful for me personally. Feel very moved by that. We're really glad to be able to offer this time slot to this. So the play for everybody who is in Savannah, Georgia, is on February 24th at 7 p.m. in Adobe Studio. You can get tickets on Eventbrite. However, if you are not in Savannah and aren't able to make it to this play, you will miss this incredible cast, but you can find out more about the Tuskegee experiments. You can also watch, I believe there is a film version out there that can be tracked down of the play. So that you can educate yourself and experience that if you're not in Savannah. If you are in Savannah, you have no business not coming. There are still some tickets left, so go on Eventbrite. Thank you to Dr. Feldshuh, and thank you, Teresa Michelle Jackson, for joining us. Thank you so much. And for everyone being here. And I am so excited to see this reading. So thanks all.
Have a wonderful time, everyone. I truly thank you for your work. Thank you, Rebecca.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Y'all got
so much for your comments.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa,
Thank
Michelle.
you. All the thanks you. All
Rebecca,
the
thank you all
thanks.
so much.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
For more content,
Thank
follow
you.
JustJuleigh.com. That's just Julie, JULEIGH.com. Thank you to our guests, and thank you for joining us this evening. Join us next week as Julie tries a different rosé.